Idea to bring the issues of the transition of professional dancers and athletes together. And before I begin, I want to bring greetings from Karen Kane, who I think most people in this room will know as one of Canada's most famous dancers and now the artistic director of the National Ballet of Canada.
She's in England.
Who's in England. Despite being in the middle of a very demanding time in my career, I felt so strongly about the very real need for an organization to help dancers transition at the end of their careers that I spent 10 years as the first chair of the DTRC. After long days of rehearsals, I'd come to board meetings in the evenings as we worked through the complicated beginnings of forming such an important organization. And I'm pleased with what we've accomplished to date. So I'm delighted to be here with three bright, intelligent, powerful, and accomplished women. And I'm going to start by introducing Joyce Ann, who is a force of nature. As I think some of you in this room know, she had a very successful career herself as a dancer. And then she decided at the end of her career that she had to do something for her colleagues, and she was the founder of the Dancer Transition Resource Center. Not content with stopping there, she also helped found the Artist Health Center. Not content to start there, she also helped found the Canadian Senior Artist Resource Network. And during all of this, of course, she's continued to be an artist herself because she stages Balanchine ballets all around the world. So with Joyce Ann, I'd just like really to start by asking you to tell us briefly what motivated you to take on the issue of dancer transition and how you managed to pull it together in 1981.
In 5 minutes.
Take as long as
No,
you
I
want.
gave you 10.
How did it start? It started because I was paralyzed, absolutely. When I stopped dancing, I'd been principal dancer of 3 different companies. I went to bed for 6 months and couldn't think of a reason for getting out. It was a very, very devastating time, as so articulately was shown this morning by the athletes and the other dancers. And finally, I was invited to teach in Saratoga, New York, so I got out of bed, basically. But I didn't get out of bed mentally or emotionally for many years. Segue very quickly, maybe 5-6 years down the road, and I got married, had a child, and broke my knee completely, so I couldn't even teach. And the doctor said, well, you have about 7 months. Meanwhile, all my friends, I thought, were doing incredibly interesting things totally unrelated to dance. And I thought, how are they doing that? You know, I'm a dancer. That's all I know. That's all I probably can do. And so I decided to write a book, and I took a tape recorder, yes, tape recorder in those days, and a microphone, and I interviewed all the dancers that were doing these incredible things, both in Canada and the States. And when we turned the tape recorder off, we discussed our colleagues, whatever happened to this one and that one, and shockingly, I found 15 of the men, all men, that I had worked with had committed suicide. And there were breakdowns, and there were terrible relationships, and there was drug addiction, and there was alcoholism. And that just shocked me because one of the worst things coming out of that 6-month period was that I thought I was the only one. I thought everybody else is fine. What's wrong with me? Because that was that era where we were taught to leave your problems at the doorstep of the studio. You come in, you work, and that's it. And I was in that bubble that Angel spoke so wonderfully about. And it never occurred to me that anybody else was going through any problems. To find that out with such devastating results, I just thought we have to do something. And so I started researching a little bit, no internet, you know, you had to just go to the library and find out what was going on. And went to England, where the only thing existing was at the time the Dancers Resettlement Fund, and a conference in New York, actually, which was put together by Actors Equity and a wonderful man named Eddie Weston. And that was all there was. And finally, I devised a plan, and I called Karen, who I'd known. I'd coached her when she was a kid at the school. Yes, I'm 110. And so, well, 105. And I said, look, is this something you'd be interested in? Because I knew she was a huge celebrity and could open doors that I never could. And as you can tell from this quote, she took it on with a vengeance, and she was not a figurehead. And she and I got on a plane to Ottawa, and at the time there was a brilliant Minister of Employment and Immigration, it was called at the time, Flora MacDonald, who had a program called Innovations, which was set up to find solutions for existing labor market problems. Well, we were a labor market problem, and if she had money, it was a solution. So she actually gave us $500,000 to start this. And so we had $500,000 to start in the first 3 years. And then that unleashed corporate funding, private funding, and we were able to get started. It took an army, and we had some angels along the way who have been with us forever. Linda Hamilton, for whom the center is named, and this brilliant man who took over when Karen and Linda as co-chairs stepped down and was a brilliant chair for years and years. And then along came brilliant Amanda, and it snowballed. But the thing I wanted to mention, and which came home so poignantly this morning as well, is we were in a different era completely than we are now. If I'm proud of one thing in the DTRC, it's the fact that I do believe now the Dancers of Canada think of transition as not a dire, devastating, end-of-life thing, that they now accept it as a way of life, and that they do plan ahead, and they do come to the center. Yes, there are still dancers, so Amanda tells me, but there were many more in my era who did not want you to tell anybody that they were at the transition center or got a grant, because they thought the artistic directors would not give them jobs, not give them parts for the remaining time they had left, and they felt that this would be detrimental to their career. We're in a different era now. The artistic directors actually, many of them supported us in Canada right away, and that was a great boost to us, because once an artistic director stood up in front of a company and said this is an issue, then there was a great sigh of relief among the dancers who didn't feel that this would be the end of their career, but rather a transitional time. It took an army to put this thing together, and one of the things that we did, and I won't talk very long, but beginning, middle, and end, this is a grassroots organization. We went across the country. We spoke to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dancers. We did research, and it was the Dancers of Canada that put this together. I put together a template. They threw it in the air, broke it apart, and downrained what is now the Dancer Transition Resource Center. And every year since, both during my tenure as executive director and I know through yours, a group comes together of regional representatives and board members, and every year something changes because the world is changing, and we have to acknowledge that. And we acknowledged it a long time ago. It started changing even when I was executive director 20 years ago. Not 20 years ago, I stepped down in 2005. So it's the dancers that are the creative force, I would say, behind the Transition Center. And we were only the executors of their wishes and their vision. And do we have a passion for it? Absolutely. Do I still have a passion for it? Absolutely. Because we all felt, who am I if I'm not a dancer? Who am I if I'm not an athlete? But you are who you are, and that's what made you an artist in the first place. And life is an art. And so whatever you do, it will translate very well into your next life. So that's how we started.
Thank you.
Cariz was also a professional dancer, 14 years, I believe, and she was she joined the Dancer Transition Resource Center, became associated with us when we first opened an office in Montreal. But she's continued to grow and develop herself. She has a specialized graduate diploma in the management of cultural organizations from the University of Montreal's Business School, and she's now studying for a master's in industrial relations from the University of Montreal. So you've been associated with us since 2002 and have sat in the office when dancers have come in. In practical terms, tell us how you deal with the dancers, how you work with the dancers, and tell us what kind of services the DTRC offers to the dancers who come into your office.
Just try to describe briefly what the program is, what kind of programs we actually run. And despite Joyce-Anne mentioned the fact that it evolves over the year, it does adjust, but I have to say that they probably nailed it from the right beginning, because if there's change, it's relatively small change that is being done for the program. So dancers are likely to hear about us first through one fabulous program, which is On the Move Danse Transit, which is the reunion of all graduates of professional dance school that occurs every year in major cities in Canada. We have offices, just to mention that the head office is set in Toronto. We opened the 2 regional offices in Vancouver and Montreal in 2002, and there's representatives all across Canada for the other provinces and territories who are not covered.
He's coming.
My mic is falling down. Oh, I want to unbutton. Here you go.
There we go.
It's because I'm from Quebec.
There we go.
Okay, so I finished. No. So there's in major cities in Canada, you'll understand that the program of Danse Transit and the way it's set up and all workshop that we organize has somewhat flavor, regional flavor, because markets are not the same all across Canada. So young dancers hear about us at that point because it's quite mandatory to come, at least in Quebec. Some schools are very dedicated also in the other provinces. Then everyone is welcome to come and see us, whether or not they're members, to talk about their career, to share their experience of their career, to talk about some issues. Usually they're unfortunately issues. They don't come to tell us that everything is beautiful, which is unfortunate. Then at some point they'll join. A few of them will join the DTRC. From the real beginning, you access to envelope. There's 20 sessions that dancers can use to go see either or of our counselors. So each province has set it up a roster. Roster, eh?
Yeah.
It's not a duck. Okay. A roster of counselors, psychologists, psychotherapists, psychoanalysts, career counselors, lawyers, academic in some provinces, and financial counselors. So each members has 20 sessions. We invite them to use them very carefully, because if you spend them all at 24, well, to your career transition, you won't have any left. You actually face the real big issue. The other envelope is the transferable skills grant. It's up to $1,500. Correct me if I'm wrong, but usually at the beginning it was used for computer lessons, probably mainly. But now that people knows how to use a computer, it's driving lessons, language. We tend also to encourage dancers to get some skills, business skills. So bookkeeping, marketing, anything, because usually, well, not usually, but a lot of dancers will choose as a parallel career or a second career a profession or a function that will likely to be self-employed. So they need these kind of skills. After, dancers, and you don't have to, there's no requirement to access these 2 first grants, but afterwards starts the requirement. After 3 years, and upon meeting other criteria, such age, length of the career, where you've performed, the density of the career, you can be eligible for other grants. First grants, I think it came, the Exploration Grant 2008, in response to the fact that dancers would request some funding to start a retraining. Some of them got caught with bad decision. So we've instituted this Exploration Grant. It's up to $1,000 to take an introduction course or a basic course into a field without leading to any certification per se. Am I taking too much time, Gary? You tell me, keep me on track. To explore. So it's the last step to validate their career choice, either as a parallel career or a second career. After 5 years of membership comes the retraining grant. So retraining grant that you can take alone, or you can take it with also a subsistence grant. So retraining grant, it's up to $4,000, covering tuition, covering transportation if the course happens somewhere else, and scholar material. And you don't have to go full-time retraining, so you can just have a project and dig into this envelope over a few times, a few years, months at least. And then there's a subsistence grant. It's for a dancer who commits to full-time retraining, which is at least 30 hours of retraining per week. So acknowledging the fact that they can't work so much at the time, and to be able to concentrate into the retraining. There's two kinds of subsistence grant. There's the subsistence 2, up to $7,500. It's monthly allowance of $1,250, up to 6 months. Yes. The other one is up to $18,000. It's a monthly allowance of $1,500, up to 12 months. But for this one, you need to commit somehow to be ready to sign the commitment in which you mentioned that you will not go back dancing. So that's it.
And then are there opportunities beyond those first ones? Are there some special grants and awards?
Oh, sorry, of course, yes. Thank you, Gary. Yes.
I didn't know if they still existed. But
They are. There's discretionary grants that are being given pretty much every year. These are competitive grants. The first grants that I was talking about are given if your project stands. But for the dancer who actually have the $18,000 one and are entering in a second year and still need some financial support, and regarding other criteria, they can compete to have some envelope, and they can go up to $22,000 as well. So combining the retraining grant and another subsistence grant. Do I forget something else?
Well done.
Or the name grant.
No.
The name.
And the named awards. Yeah.
Right. Upon great donors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Amanda was.
Well, Amanda can speak to that
Yeah.
in a second. I'll introduce Amanda to you, who has worked not only as a dancer but also as an actor. She had a 30-plus year career in the profession, and then started working with the Dancer Transition Resource Center. And she has stepped in admirably and seamlessly since she took over the executive director's role in 2006. So you can start by just clarifying those last awards. But then what I really wanted to ask you, Amanda, is even in the time that I've known you, we've talked extensively about how the dance environment has changed in Canada, and it continues to change. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about how the DTRC has responded to that and where you see the DTRC going in the future.
Okay, so I think I would just agree with Parise in that the way the DTRC was set up at the beginning was really excellent, because it's tweaking, that's all. And I think that, when the mandate was expanded to include the transitions into and within, that was mid-90s, was just really, really important. And we've talked about that today, about that looking at the whole arc of the career and having those discussions really early. And those transitions, those various career transitions, are not just about the out of transition, but the into and within, and that entire support, which was put together so brilliantly, which has meant that, it is really, it's all just there. The platform is just there, and it's just an opportunity to look at, what else could we add, or where could we change our focus a little bit. So yes, so the named awards are really important to us, because they are discretionary, and they're dependent on private donors. And we have, again, the wonderful Linda Hamilton, who is a tremendous patron of ours, and there are many donors too who make those awards possible. And in terms of the changes, I think the biggest change, well, there are so many new things that are happening. There's a broader diversity of dance forms, I think, that are becoming more professional. The most striking one in the last 5 years is probably the urban dance field, which has come off the street and very much into the professional milieu, and there are a lot of them. And we are only just beginning to grasp what that career will look like, because it's so new as a career. And at the moment, they're very young, most of them. Some of the older ones have moved into more typical stage careers, bringing the urban dance on the stage. And I think careers that used to be more thought of as culturally specific are also now becoming more of a professional dance career. The South Asian, the Asian, and those transitions are quite different from the ballet career, which is that typical career, which is much more like an athlete, I think, which is that full on intensity and much more of a sudden stop. The increase of the contemporary dance field has really grown, and dancers who have a very broad career, interdisciplinary. There are more opportunities for dancers now, but it's also more precarious. And there are a growing number of independent dancers who are not with a full-time company, and that makes a very big difference to the career structure, because performance for those dancers, and it's always been so, it's been part of a portfolio, but it's very much, I think, a lessening portfolio. There are fewer dancers who are independent dancers who are just dancers. The recent survey that we did, a huge portion of them, the performance career is a part of it, and a very important part, but they are also doing all kinds of other dance work. I think the 40% of their time, they said, was spent, the average, 40% of their time was spent in performance and rehearsal. Another, I've got the number here so I'd remember. 32% was in other dance work, and almost 30% was in work outside the dance field. So there is more of that happening. And what that means is,
And also, it's also true that there are fewer companies, right?
Yes.
We've lost
Yeah.
a lot of dance companies.
we've lost a lot of dance companies, and the dance companies we have, there are very few of them that have a full year support. The seasons are much smaller. So even ballet dancers are having stretches where they have other work to find and other work to do, which is actually good for them, I think. It gives them some time to try out other ways of performing. It gives them time to maybe take some courses, do some other work. What else?
So you were getting to how DTRC is responding to it.
Yes, how DTRC is responding to it. That we're still looking at that, and that's a piece that needs more reflection on our part, more research on our part, to see how we will respond to that. Because as Paris was saying, a number of our grants have an intensity of career portion, intensity of performance portion, and that is not as easy for some dancers to meet. The other piece, I think, is that dancers are dancing much longer. And they're dancing much longer because there's better training, there's a better understanding of how to keep your body fit. There is a much more opportunity to do work in the community-based artwork. There are things like motion capture. There are a lot of different things that a dance career can just transform a bit. The performance career can transform, and the other dance work can take place, just take a larger part. So we're looking at dancers who are transitioning over a much longer period.
Can I jump in and just say,
Yeah.
in the very beginning, of course, and not only very beginning, but for about 15 years, one of the reasons we got funding was because we could prove that the body gave out after a while. But when you have a changing society where the dancer is doing things that doesn't necessarily involve the body, choreographing, teaching, although you do get up and do things, that becomes more difficult. However, society itself has changed. I mean, when we started, everybody had, not everybody, but a goodly portion of our society had full-time jobs. And now, of course, this serendipitous, uncertain life that artists just generally have is also true in the larger society. So I think government funding opens their mind to a different kind of model because of that. They can relate to it, because when we first went to them, they went, why would we give dancers in transition? Why not farmers in transition? Why not, these people in transition? And so now there's a little bit of a level playing field between artists and the society in which they live.
Yeah,
If I may interject, there was a study conducted in Quebec by the government of Quebec, l'Observatoire de la Culture, and we thought that injury was the #1 reason why a dancer would actually transition. Now it became the financial precarity. So I think that given this factor that is unlikely to be solved within the next 20 years, DTRC may retweak their program, but will remain pertinent to help dancer professional, to help Canada, to have talent still be active on the scene and still have a sense of accomplishment, because what they do beside to sustain that career as a dancer will be satisfying enough, so that happy person can see through the career. So besides the fact that we can, but yes, they retrain later, but they do retrain anyhow. And we know that if we retrain them at 50 years old, the issue and the pressure on them is bigger than when we retrain them at around 35 and 40 years old, where there's a return on the investment of going back full-time study at that point.
Let me put an observation out there and ask you each to respond to it. And Joyce-Anne touched on it briefly. I was struck by the panel, the game plan panel, and the comment about sometimes the reluctance to go to your coach. And Joyce Ann referred to how talking about transition used to be a taboo because you didn't want your artistic director to find out. So just each of you comment about what you feel now about how the whole dance community is dealing with that issue and whether it's still a taboo, if it really truly is open, and so on. So Amanda?
It is very much more open. I mean, certainly, I think that you'll see it in I'm sure you see it in the ballet company. We see dancers taking online courses and thinking about that preparation. And when we talk to them, you'll say, "Has anybody thought about what they'd like to do afterwards?" And a lot of them have ideas. You know, they really have thought about that. And you know, in terms of students coming out of training institutions. The last year or the year before was the first time when we went to talk to the students. The first time I heard them say, "We know we're going to have a parallel career." Like they knew it graduating, that this performance career was not going to be the only thing they had. So that is coming. Well, they see it with the graduates ahead of them, but I think it's also coming in the discussion in the schools too. The schools understand that this is a different world, and that to have a parallel career, and that we had at the On the Move conference, we had one of our panels a couple of years ago was, how do I feel like a dancer when I'm not dancing? And it was that worry of feeling like, if I'm not performing, then I must be a failure. I mustn't be a dancer. And it's just giving them the understanding that that is the way the world is right now. That unless you're with a full-time company, you are a dancer. You are a dancer who is teaching at the moment and you know, getting ready for a performance that may be coming up in 2 months. You're a dancer who is working at some other job, because that is the way the career is right now. Does that answer your question?
Suzanne?
Well, I think that's true. I mean, one dancer said to me, "Whenever I see you coming," now this was 1986, so thank God it won't happen anymore, but whenever I see you coming, it's like saying, "Can I choose my coffin now?" And of course, that made me feel really great. But it changed in Canada. But last week in Germany, I was staging a ballet, and I had my 4 principal dancers, and they had asked for extra rehearsal on the day off, and so I did that. And at the end of the rehearsal, I said, "Okay, guys, you've been rehearsing morning, noon, and night for 3 weeks now. Tomorrow," I was being facetious, but I wasn't. I said, "Tomorrow, I really want you to take that day off, and please don't think about Mozartiana," which was the ballet we were doing. And the expression on their faces told the whole story. They sort of went, like nobody had ever said that to them before. And I thought, wow, you know, there are pockets in the world where this is still an issue. And it shocked me, because I thought, well, what I know from our international colleagues, that so much progress has been made, but here I was in a very large ballet company, and it was alive and well. And so it worries me on a global scale, but it doesn't worry me because...
All right, we have a few minutes still to go, and I would open it up to the audience if you have any questions. Okay, over here first, and then over here.
Working for a ballet company, what responsibility do you think the companies have to aid in transition?
Well,
It's a big
I think,
question.
you know, I think definitely to get behind the notion. And the structure of the DTRC is that it is voluntary that the dancers join. What we haven't mentioned is that the company matches their contribution. So that's the first responsibility, a fiscal one, which by nature is a visionary one as well. It's been our experience in Canada, I think, you know, Amanda can talk to today, but certainly in my time, that the artistic directors of Canada were from day one behind it. And that responsibility, and the modern companies, they got behind it, the heads of schools, We have Pat Fraser on our board forever, who's the head of Toronto Dance Theatre School. So Mavis Staines of the National Ballet School. Everyone was actually behind it. So yes, I think it is a responsibility, definitely.
I think, sorry, just to further that, I think one of the things, and I know Barry Houston is very keen on this, is the university education piece that that you've had a stab at it, I've had a stab at it. That's a piece that we really are working on to move ahead that, because to come out of a company and transition and have to start with a BA, especially in today's world where BA is really not an end degree the way it used to be. They need to be ahead of the game while they're still dancing and have the opportunity to do that undergraduate study.
Yeah, when I had a principal dancer say to me, "Can I leave rehearsal 10 minutes early, please? I have an exam." I was, whoa. Because the DTRC were offering courses on site. And so they had an exam and they wanted to cut the rehearsal. So I was a little bit torn.
I would add that in the responsibility of the company, it's to acknowledge that you will be in the blind spot for some aspect of the career transition of the dancers, and that's normal. There's a great confidentiality that will be kept, even the fact that we would like the taboo to be completely lifted. Confidentiality will remain, and it's exactly the same in other business where employees doesn't want to necessarily tell the boss their intention to leave the company. It's the same thing in a way. So it's not a disloyalty. In fact, what I hear in the office is they are greatly grateful to most of them towards their company and their artistic director. And it's because of that deep love that they're torn with the idea of leaving that company. And so it's just maybe be easy on them and acknowledge that it's not necessarily your fault if the dancer leaves or retired. It's not that you have done something wrong necessarily. It's just the nature of the profession.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry.
We have a couple people
Yes.
who also want to ask questions back here first.
So what you're talking about in terms of the resources available for professional dancers transitioning out of their professional careers, it's amazing to hear that you are seeing artistic directors behind this. And I'm wondering if you have any experience with transition for pre-pro students, so whether or not these sorts of resources are available to kids at the high school level who are looking to determine their career beyond the age of 18 or even 16, 14. And how do you get into that culture where I don't know, at least in my experience, whether that same openness is there to understanding that there has to be something beyond a truly strictly performance career at some point.
Well, can I just talk about what we're doing this fall? Last year, I've surveyed all graduates from Quebec program. So there's like around 80 young dancers embarking the market. And I've asked them how likely they were to hear about during the last year of their professional training, how they were open to hear about career transition. And I was stunned with the response. They really said, it's important. We feel that it's important to hear about it. They were already keen on and open on the fact that they needed a portfolio right at the beginning of things to do just to makes ends meet.
Yes, make ends meet. Very good.
So this year, I've put together a workshop for the graduate, and I'm touring right now the graduate with this 1-hour workshop on career transition. So I can't measure the effect, not even a short-term effect, but they are super open for it. because there's a way of presenting career transition not as an end, but just as a transformation. And that when time comes, it's going to be welcome.
So you're talking about end of career as
End of
opposed
career.
to parallel.
Yes, but I do talk about different paths of career. Yes, you can have you can make the choice to have a parallel career that will maybe eventually take over your performance career, or do something else, or wait. If you have enough activity to sustain financially yourself, wait at the end of your dance career and restart.
Okay, I think we had one more question over here, and I will invite each of you to make a comment either in response to the question
Okay.
or anything else you want to say.
Thank you. I just wanted to know your thoughts on what was recently said, that retraining at 50, of course, is a little bit more difficult than retraining at 35, 40. Yet dancer career span is becoming longer, and now 35 is peak time to be working, and I approached Paris, and many other people have told me you're not in transition yet because you're dancing and have work. Yet with foresight and being a woman and other things, it's important to consider parallel careers. So I would like to just know, maybe personal or to anybody, words of advice on how to kind of ride two horses at once, because often athletes and dancers will kind of all eggs in one basket, really give their all for one thing. But if you feel like you need, for financial reasons, mental stability, etc., to have multiple options, how you would go about somebody trying to keep a career and start a new one, maybe.
Okay, very quickly. Joyce-Ann, then Paris, then Amanda.
I think the main thing is to realize that you are not just an athlete, you are not just a dancer, and whatever else you do only enriches you as an athlete and a dancer, so that you become a deeper, richer, more profound person of understanding, and that whether you're still dancing or doing your athletic career, it can only help. That it's a question of perception. And that's what's incredibly difficult, as we heard this morning, for all of us, I mean, who made that transition at the time. But if it's presented as an enhancement rather than a transition, we use the word transition, but we went, in the early days, we went through many, many meetings of that word being eliminated, because many dancers didn't want that word in it, because they shift, it was a shift rather than. I liked the athlete this morning that said plan A and plan A, not plan A and plan B. So it's a bit like that.
Well, I think that there's nothing wrong, on the contrary, to really plan ahead, even though it's not imminent that you do your career transition. So you can have, as the sports people said, if you have a plan that is quite set, it may actually help your performance to be stronger. Because and allow you to be more focused. I think that in dance, what I see it more in men. Men are a scarce resource in dance, so they can have contract on the long term, and sometimes I can see some of them who reach like 45 years old still dance, and I see that maybe that day is going to end, where they're going to have contract, and they might have leaped over the good period to transition. So sometimes I would invite them to just consider just going back to school, or just take one course to address that.
Amanda.
I think it's about choice and options. I think to understand that you want to be in charge of your own career, and look ahead and make sure that you are leaving yourself options and choice, and to get advice, and both from people like us, but also people who've gone through it, and talk to other people in other fields that you're interested in, because I think there's a very big gap between what you imagine a career to be like and what it really is. As a lot of people would say, oh, dancers, it must be just so romantic and wonderful, and you know, the accolades you get, they don't see the bloody feet and the ice packs and things like that. So
Thank you very much.
thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Gary.